Hello from my little room. I thought I should probably do another vlog entry, the trans refugee journey. And there's a cat who's asking for his nighttime munchies. And you're not getting any because it said he's food, but when I'm done, I'll get him some of his kibble. It's a cat. Yeah, would you like to see the cat? This is Bowie. He's not my kitty, but there we go. But he's a very affectionate kitty. I really enjoy having a beard. I never thought I'd have a beard. And it turns out it's dark red, and it's stiff, and its thickness is uneven, but it's symmetrical, so that's good. And while it has a thin spot down here, it's down here, so it's not really noticeable. But I really like having a beard. I feel like myself. Cat. Oh my God, what the hell? This this cat smells like he was in something soapy or something. Oh gosh, I think maybe this is Fresh Step. You just came out of the litter box. Okay. This is an affectionate kitty who has no concept of personal space. And a distracting kitty. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, I'm not sure I can even encapsulate the topic. I'll just talk and maybe it'll be encapsulated when I speak, and it will be encapsulated in the title. As I'm sitting here in somebody else's house in San Francisco, as I get my own shit together, but it's very late at night. It's the time where a lot of people reflect. As I am wearing a skirt, and not a kilt, it's a skirt, but it's a cargo skirt. It's apparently, it looks masculine enough for me that I like. You are really distracting. I'm very happy to be out of an abusive environment, and I'm happy to be in a far, far safer state than Georgia, especially since my family was in the process. They were radicalized in the sense of being radicalized in the far right. They were radicalized. And knowing I was suicidal, they still had guns all over the house, many of which were loaded. These were not kind, passionate, or responsible people. I guess what I wanted to talk about is mixed emotions. So growing up like a lot of queer folks, I was certainly I was in several closets. A trans closet at a time. The first closet I came out of, or at least dipped a toe out of in high school, was letting some people know that I was bisexual. Now there's a label called pansexual, which probably suits me better. What do you want, cat? Calm down, cat. Just chill. Lay down or something. Okay. But I was in, essentially, yes, I was in a trans closet, a trans mask closet, but I was also in a non-binary closet. And I could get away with being a tomboy, so that's what I called myself. And in high school, people called me a lesbian behind my back. I presented as masculine as I could, as masculine as I could get away with. And here's Seti, here's my cat. He's not going to get in my lap. Seti. Okay, Seti, I'll give you your food. Nope, not you, Bowie. I'm gonna have to get the spray bottle. And I'm not editing this out. And I am getting the spray bottle. Ugh. Bowie, no. Get. Okay, now that Seti's eating, I can hold a trusty spray bottle and stand guard. So, through the 90s, my family wasn't very accepting, but their idea of transgender people was, well, they're crazy or whatever, but whatever you want to do, as long as you don't make it my business, I don't care. And I think that was a lot of people's attitudes. I think the conservatives were often very, like, obviously you had very hateful people, but I think many conservatives were consistent with their conservatism in that they were like, if I'm not paying for it, if you're not trying to make it my business, I don't care. But then if you actually would have come out, then they would have started caring, and then they would mistreat you or discriminate against you or something like that. But until then, as long as it was considered something distant, at least with my family, it was never anything that mattered. And interestingly, in high school, my mother, yes, she was very abusive toward me, as far as being emotionally abusive, and she never raised me to be an open-minded person. But in the car when I was in high school, she came out to me as bisexual, and I remember the conversation well. It was at night. We were leaving the house, so maybe we were going out to dinner or something, but it was me and her in the car, and we were leaving the house, and I remember the streetlights were on. It was dusk, and I got a little embarrassed and a little flustered, and said, "Oh, well, I don't believe in that. And and I reacted because I did, not because I really didn't believe that people were bisexual, but because I was a closet case, major closet case. But again, I wasn't raised in an accepting home. I was raised in a society that was very unaccepting, and parents that were hypercritical of me. There was no way I was ever going to see my home as a place of support and openness. I just figured they mirrored all the values of society, because generally speaking they did. And also, for them it was a big burden just for allowing me to exist in their home. Like it was like they were just really, really put upon for not being able to shoot me in the face and chuck me in the ground, because I was such an inconvenience. That was the attitude they at least projected to me. Nope. Dive. Nope. Get out. Now Dive is the other cat, and I'm not gonna pick him up. Nope. And I'm spraying him because Seti's eating. And I'm going to feed them too when I'm done with this video. But it's easier to have one kitty eating where I can watch him. He can't eat the kibble, and they get the kibble. But when I was growing up in Texas, I've lived all over the country. But when I was in Texas, I was 6, 7, 8 years old. And the idea that I got from Texas, whether it was from television, whether it was from movies, whether it was from news, whether it was from the talk shows that, this was before Jerry Springer, but even still, the talk shows, it would always be men who want to be women or something like that. And in a weird sort of way, it gave me hope because I knew there was something about me. I didn't know it was called transgender, but I knew something was wrong. And I was pretty confident that when puberty started, something different would show, something would be wrong physically. So I had evidence because I knew my parents were not going to be kind, friendly people if I just, what I now understand to be coming out, if I just came out to them. One of their chief interests in my upbringing was to make sure that I conformed. It didn't work. Yeah. Anyway. Let's see. I'm gonna put this here on the floor for now. I've been working on a picture. I'm not gonna show you yet. I'm not even very proud of this picture. I'm not liking it. But anyway, I'm putting the cat food away. So. My parents watched news so much. I remember seeing that, like the first time it was on television, I was sitting on the floor. I remember watching that Dan Rather report that ends up in every documentary about AIDS. That one. The background is super boring and it's all like beige and shit. But it was a very famous news story that shows up in every stinking documentary about it. I sat and watched that as a child. I would have been like 6 or 7, maybe 8 at the very oldest. And having watched a lot of media like that, and having seen various kinds of queerness, whether it was being gay or trans or lesbian or just not conforming to gender norms, like what would be called transvestites, or which is different from the style that is drag, which is different from drag queens and drag kings, anything that went against the gender norm. The message I always got is, if I am myself, I am going to end up dying of AIDS, which was like the worst disease ever. I was going to end up on drugs. I was going to end up a prostitute. I was going to end up homeless. And nobody was going to like me. Nobody was going to love me. I wouldn't have a family. Unfortunately, that one has come to fruition. And when I say prostitute, I'm thinking your stereotypical street walking sex worker who doesn't want to be there getting beaten up by a pimp. Now I'm all about, hey, sex work is real work, workers' rights are sex workers' rights are human rights, sex work is real work. Okay. But I'm talking about your stereotypical image filtered through the mind of a child, like, this picture of just the worst life anyone could ever live. I thought that's what being myself would result in. And in high school, I wasn't so afraid. I knew I was better educated about, say, HIV, AIDS. But my family, the way that it is, toxic as it is, I understood, and given that it's in many places it is still legal in the United States to discriminate for being gay, and where it isn't, if the culture still allows for it, then it's very, very easy to fire somebody for being gay. You let other employees make all kinds of mistakes and write up every little thing, and even if you have to make stuff up, but make up little things that are not like that, you can't, where it's just your employer's word against the boss. You have a bad attitude. What's wrong with my attitude? Well, your argument, I'm not. See, you're argumentative. That kind of shit. So that still happens a lot. But I understood in high school, no, I didn't have to die of AIDS. No, I did not have to shoot up heroin. But I knew it meant if I was out, I may lose whatever support I might get from my family. I might never be hired. I might never find housing. That said, in the 90s, from the early 90s to the late 90s, and the late 90s, I was kind of awkwardly sticking a toe out of the closet with some people. But yeah, throughout the 90s, I was watching with a level of hope as, pride festivals and pride parades and support groups, whether like PFLAG or whether it be like, offhand I can't, as like I know Acted Up long before the 90s, but, yeah, that's when I was starting to hear about them. And then because since AIDS ravaged the gay community, it's like you had 70s disco and you had things moving forward, and then AIDS just tore a big hole in the community. And watching that as a kid and knowing enough that Ronald Reagan and many, good boy, said he's drinking his water. Ronald Reagan and many other Republicans were not doing shit about it, and so many preachers were blaming AIDS on just the gays, and transgender people never got mentioned. They're very often called transsexuals, but if they were even acknowledged as existing, and intersex people, which of course should be welcome in the community, and sure, include them on the flag. I mean, I would generally say everyone's included in the rainbow, but if the rainbow's not enough for you, add the black and brown stripes, add the trans colors, add the intersex purple circle inside the, on the yellow field, all of it. Yeah, I'm good with it. And then use whatever flag you like. I left my trans pride flag and my pansexual pride flag in Georgia with my family of origin, because they ain't family, because they didn't treat me like family. But so in the 90s, and especially in the early O's, and then when gay marriage got legalized, I was pretty much like, hey, the people who don't like us are outliers, they're whatever. And I was going to a transgender support group, so even though my mother was very down on it, she knew I was going to a support group for transgender people. I was out. She was not in any kind of supportive. And she was much of the reason why I was going to the support group. But it was on the level of like, okay, she knew I was going, she didn't like it, but she'd rather I be there than, I guess, I don't know, getting black market hormones or something. I don't know. I don't know what the hell she thought, but I was extremely hopeful, and even when the first inklings of the bathroom scare came up, I was frustrated, but then as I talked with some queer elders, they were like, oh yeah, they did a gay bathroom scare in the 70s. It's fine. This is all the same rhetoric. We recognize it. It's fine. This will blow over. Hi, cat. You are so distracting. I know, my legs are crossed right now. I don't know how this cat finds this comfortable. But anyway, my cat's back behind the computer monitor. So, it's like, okay, if I wanted to marry a woman, if I wanted to marry a man, if I was lucky enough to be able to transition, because I didn't ever think that I could or would, but if I was lucky enough to be able to transition, then, it still wouldn't matter if I wanted to marry a woman or a man or an intersex person that didn't have to identify as a woman or a man. They could just identify as themselves as intersexed or as neutral or as non-binary or however they wanted to identify and all that. And I was very hopeful, especially in the late 90s and early 00s. I was really hopeful. And I thought, you know what? Even though my family has no good words for me, if I come home with somebody of the same sex or the same gender, or if I come, or hey, maybe I can come out to them and they're not going to be nice to me because they never were, but they're not going to be mean to me on account of coming out. And maybe they'll support me because, now we're in a political climate that has a far less religious fundamentalist viewpoint, far less gender essentialist viewpoint, etc. And it's just a lot more open. And so maybe their opinions will be like, well, that's weird, but we want you to be healthy and happy, so okay, we'll help you transition, right? Well, when I came out to my mother, I was 28 when I came out to my mother, she said, of course I don't believe in that. Don't tell anybody. And now I understand that. Now, this gets into like, I don't know if my mother is a narcissist, and I don't know if she has narcissistic personality disorder. Get your claws out of my leg. But she ticks off some of the signs, and I recognize now I can't change her. I won't ever change her. I can't help her. I won't ever help her. It's dumping energy, time, passion, sleep, self-worth, dumping it into the black hole that is my mother. Get your claws out of my fucking leg. No, get down. All right. Okay. Now that that's over. So now, after, and I don't want to say, well, ever since 2016, but it was more like, it more started with 2014, 2015. And I was guilty of for a little while, getting into the anti-social justice warrior movement. Because my take on it is like, look, you guys, we can be married. There's some famous transgender people that they're getting flack, but it's from like weird fundamentalists and stuff. Most people aren't saying this. We're doing a lot better than we were. There's problems, sure, we need to address those, but we're not best off addressing those by yelling and throwing things and accusing everyone of being sexist and racist and yelling weird in-group language at people who might just be innocently ignorant and we just don't know. And so if you had someone, excuse me, I have an itch. So yeah, so some of these videos that, the cringe videos who are like, blue-haired feminist, blah, 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 follows man around, blah, 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 lays on the ground screaming, blah, 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 blah. And I didn't understand necessarily, I wasn't thinking, one, those videos might just be taken completely out of context. Like maybe someone was being harassed and goaded and goaded and goaded. Or maybe this is somebody with severe mental illness. We're filming them and going, ha ha, look at the far left, whatever. Or maybe they were actually, or maybe they're having an autistic breakdown or some kind of panic attack or whatever. And then some dishonest interlocutor just sticks it up on YouTube and says, look, this is how the left reacts. This is how people are fighting for social justice. And I didn't rub two brain cells together and think about context and what context I'm missing, and recognize that, like, yes, while there are some on my team that act in wildly inappropriate ways, that does not, one or two bad apples do not reflect on all of us, nor does it reflect on the validity of our movements, nor does it reflect on the validity of our existence or our liberation. And then as well, I learned about respectability politics and how it's used as an obstacle to our liberation. It's like, hey, we're making valid points and you won't listen to us. That's why we're coming to your meeting and yelling. We're not going to listen to you because you came to our meeting and yelled. And if you do that, we're not going to listen. Forget that we weren't listening in the first place. So just go be respectable and we'll listen. Yeah, quietly. So quietly we can't hear because actually we don't care. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, yeah, and I was too coming from a place of privilege. So it's not that I did not support queer liberation or black liberation or disabled liberation or poor liberation or the liberation of any marginalized group, immigrants, documented and undocumented, etc. I mean, the mentally ill. Hey, no. All right, gotta get the spray bottle again. Smart kitty. Yeah, I gotta get them their kibble. But now people are going to. It is a nuanced debate as to what actually constitutes genocide and what it actually is. But yes, there is a genocide happening, and in many places, in many red states, there's legislation being made and a culture being nurtured that makes life so difficult for transgender people as to make it unlivable. And not everyone is able to leave. Not everyone's able to flee. It's just a fact. I am very lucky and I'm very privileged on several counts that I'm here. I lost the vast majority of my shit. I am very fucking lucky that I am fucking here. Huge, huge, huge privilege. And when I rebuild my life, when I get my shit back together, I am obligated as a human being to do something to help others in similar situations to what I was in. Anyway, so I've said it so many times. This is surreal. It's unbelievable, but it's here. And it's not just like, this would be much more believable if we hadn't come very far at all from, say, 1985. I mean, if it was a bit of a steady decline, or if it just kind of plateaued, actually it kind of goes up and down, because Jorgensen, I forget her first name, but there's an actress who was, who was transgender. She was a trans woman, and the media wasn't making a big hullabaloo about it, except to say, wow, this is really unusual. Wow, not this is terrible, this is shocking, this is controversial. But wow, this rugged military man, manly man, became a woman. It's a marvel of medical science. Wow. The attitude was very different. And if you look at media, there's a lot of channels around YouTube that I can't name offhand, and I apologize, that analyze queer media as well as queer coded media. This cat is going to knock down Seti's food. Oh. Yeah, I really do gotta get them their kibble. But when you look at media anyway, at least for white queers, you have peaks and valleys, and we're in a valley now, and it doesn't make sense. I mean, it is what it is, and for those of you with more insight, I'm 44. If you're like 65, maybe you have more insight and it makes sense to you why we're here instead of here, right? I was kind of expecting a steady incline, because we've been having a steady incline for decades. And I remember there was a movie that came out, I think, in the 60s called Queen. It was a documentary about drag queens and pageant for drag queens. And then, but there was this a white image of beauty. It was, I'm privileged. And then if you watch Paris is Burning, I remember watching Paris is Burning, and I'm like, we're going back to those days. But then in the Black community, I cannot speak to the queer Black experience because I am not Black. If you want to get technical, I'm part Black. Actually, I don't have the Black experience. And the reason I'm part Black is because my ancestors owned slaves. I am wildly white privileged. There's a lot of experiences I would never try to claim. Apparently my family got far enough from its Blackness. I'm descended from, I'm pretty damn directly descended from the people who owned slaves, so that tells you some non-consensual things happened. Also, evidence suggests that my mother has some Ashkenazi Jew in her, and my family is separated enough from that as to not be marginalized. We have no cultural understanding of that even. It just never showed up in how my family operates. No, so yeah, we have a lot of privilege. I have a lot of privilege. I can say, yes, I'm disabled. Yes, I'm queer. Yes, I'm poor. Yes, I'm a refugee in my own country, but I have a lot of fucking privilege. Lots of fucking privilege as compared to, say, maybe an undocumented immigrant who is in a fundamentalist homophobic family, but also brown and undocumented and poor and maybe also disabled and maybe disfigured. Maybe a victim of sexual assault and has that trauma. Like, I'm mentally ill, but I have access to mental health care at the moment. It's telehealth, but it's done through telehealth, but I have it at the moment. There's people who are mentally ill don't have it. What about unhoused? What about a person who, say, I'm get mapping out this hypothetical situation. What if this undocumented child is a child of migrant workers and just gets moved everywhere and doesn't have health care because undocumented? You know, so yeah, there's a lot of privileges that I have. So, and literally, I mean, I would have been happy to escape to, say, New York or Massachusetts or Connecticut. I know some people in Connecticut that I'm very close to, whatever. And I'm lucky enough, I've escaped to San Francisco. Literally, I'm in San Francisco. I can't stay here due to cost of living, but I'm a trans refugee in San Francisco. How cool is that? Oh, I mean, I haven't experienced any of the queer culture here yet, but I've been here for 3 weeks. That's maybe I need to reach out. But right now I'm working on getting all my doctors because I need some doctors, and I'm getting other economic shit locked in so I can get some money coming in for myself. This is the shirt that I escaped in, by the way. So it's weird. I've reflected, like, I'm watching Paris is Burning, not now, but I've watched it a couple of times, and and there are so many people who are still in the very same situation now, and even and like even in the 80s, though, it's funny because there wasn't bathroom bills. Yeah, you had to make a decision as a transgender person when you're presenting. How are you presenting? Where are your feet going to go? The rule I was told is make sure your feet are going how you're presenting, because that's where you're going to be the safest. I think I've always followed that as a rule of thumb. But something like that might well have been good enough. But then what happens when the bathroom bill comes down the pipe? And even though, how do you enforce that? Well, maybe you have a little bit of a 5 o'clock shadow. Maybe Maybe someone picks up that your jaw's a little square. Somebody's trans spotting. Somebody's, for whatever reason, clocked you. There's people who aren't transgender who have been clocked as transgender and beaten up because the Republicans are creating an environment where those people over there, they're a threat. And even if we can't make laws, remember that they're a threat. And they're going to get your children. So you better make sure you do something about it. No, I mean, yeah, don't do anything about it though, like illegal. Don't be done law and order. But they're a big threat, and it'd be a real shame if they went into the wrong bathroom and something bad happened to them, right? And no, alone that is not genocide, but compounded with a bunch of other things. That's part of genocide, actually. And so I'm like, when I'm watching something like Paris is Burning, I'm like, we should be a lot further along now. In a lot of ways, a lot of us are, but in a lot of ways, a lot of us are not. And I'm like, our country, I mean, yeah, everyone should be a lot further along, but in a lot of ways, our country has not improved from, children getting kicked out because they're homeless and having to go on the street and get hormones on the black market and just for existing as yourself, like two men holding hands, or not conforming to gender norms or whatever, you're risking getting beaten up. I mean, the fact that I can have a beard and wear a skirt in this city is a privilege. I'm not here. I'm very unlikely to get beaten up, but yeah. And I know in places like, well, I don't want to disparage like any other country, but I know there are a lot of places that are very, very much worse, where you will get beaten for sure. And like, yeah, no, moving on. Yeah, so it's all right. They need their kibble. They're getting the zoomies and yeah. So the larger point of my video is like, for me, in the context of my life, and yes, my privileges, I've seen lots of improvement. And so it is really fucking weird to me that it's actually this bad. And I've often said, like, I hate being queer. Not in the sense of like I hate myself, like I'm ashamed, like I think I did something bad, but in the sense of I hate the queer experience because so much suffering is so often part of the queer experience. I don't have a family anymore. This isn't rare. It's very common among queer people to not have a family anymore. For my part, my family too, much of it was because they were abusive, but the political climate just made them very much worse and far less safer than, they weren't like safe people, but far less safe now. And I enjoy having a beard and wearing a skirt. It's cool. I enjoy having a beard. Growing up, I expected to grow a beard, but before a T, of course, I never could. Those expectations were dashed. I expect to grow up into a man, but that's not what my body did. It's what my head did. It's not what my body did. Yes, cat, I know. I'm gonna... Oh, you have water on your butt. Yeah, you have water on your butt. So I'm gonna get these... I'm gonna go get these kitties their kibble. Yeah. So I'd so much like to see the culture and the politics of my country advance to a point where being queer, being openly queer, does not threaten your existence. It's like a very, very, very bare minimum. And I don't know what to do to get there. And I don't live with the illusion that I'm doing something big and important by making these trans refugee journey vlogs. I'm doing it sort in the context of preserving history. If you're watching this because somebody thousands of years from now dug up some data, hi, it's the year of their Lord, 2023 CE, after what people are calling the pandemic, which was COVID-19, one of many coronaviruses. Nope, get down, I'll get the spray bottle. Yeah, United States. A lot of people still refer to it as AD, but now people are calling it CE for Christian era, and BCE would be obviously before Christian era. But, you know, if I were to place it within the Muslim calendar, the Jewish calendar, Chinese lunar calendar, whatever, I couldn't offhand. The date, it's the middle of August. I believe it's the 18th. No, I believe now it is the 19th. It's very, very early Sunday morning. It is August 19th, 8th month of the year. We're on a solar calendar, and in the northern hemisphere, so in most places it's hot. However, San Francisco is not most places. Our weather is just bizarre because we're so close to the Pacific. Fucking amazing. Especially if you're on the east side of the bay. Yeah, it's wild. So I have this weird conception of my place in history as being a place in other people's history. I hope the data is recovered, and I hope your world is better than my world, and I hope we didn't have too many disasters. I hope we didn't have a nuclear war. I hope we didn't have other pandemics and shit, but we probably did. We've probably had some civilizational collapses before somebody recovers this data. I hope not. You know, I hope our technology moves the world into a place with far less suffering and far more joy, instead of turning it into this bizarre hellscape where artificial intelligence does all the creative things while we barely subsist off scraps that we get for these mindless manual labor jobs that we were trying to build the machines to do. Yeah, just to barely scrape by, while a class of this, well, a very, very few super duper rich people who make money for sitting and having money keep sitting and making money for sitting and having money. The economy such that it is, I think, may be on the verge of collapse, but not for the reasons conspiracy theorists think. It's not the Jews, I swear. But there's a lot of corruption in banking, lots of corruption in trading, lots of corporate corruption on the top level of corporations, lots of yes, political corruption, but also in the United States now, much of the corruption is corporations influencing our government with money. And of course, politicians, like many in Congress, politics here takes a lot of money. And the basic idea is that if you don't have money, you can't participate in politics. And Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals is a very interesting book talking about organizing political action when you're dealing with communities that do not have the force and power of money behind them. Okay, so thank you for listening. If you are thousands of years in the future, I hope you're very much better off than so many of us. I mean, relative to the rest of history, we're doing pretty well. Sadly, that's not saying very much. Some humans have been to the moon. That's cool. We had the Martian land rovers. That's cool. I don't think human civilization is getting off this rock before the sun, becomes a red giant and expands and swallows us. I would like to see us become... so many of us are so much worse off than myself. I'd like to see a world where that isn't true. And I'd like to see us get off this rock. Nothing against the rock. Love the planet. Like, I cry over how I miss trees. I cry over rivers drying up as the climate is changing. But I want us to be able... We will reach a point where our planet is not survivable. Hopefully not through our doing, but we'll reach it. And I want to see us get to a point where we can leave and survive elsewhere. But right now we're at a point where I don't know if we can even survive our own shenanigans. Can we survive capitalism? Like, I don't want to sit here and spew out like communist propaganda for some like statist communist, some rehash of North Korea or some rehash of Mao's Cultural Revolution or some rehash of the Soviet Union and Stalinist purges and the Holodomor and all that shit. I don't want to spew propaganda for, tyranny. But right now, in the United States, the tyranny that's threatening us is they call it a they're not fond of the Jews. They're fond of Israel. They're fond of the Jews as a puzzle piece in a larger narrative that is their narrative, but certainly not a Jewish narrative. So anyway, they're fond of the Jews who keep their place, and they're fond of Israel as an excuse to do what it is that they do. But the tyranny that is most threatening to us now, especially me, as a queer, disabled, mentally ill person, is Christofascism, basically. On that happy note, I will end my trans refugee journey vlog. And god damn it, it's so weird being a refugee in my own fucking country. It is so fucking weird. I don't know how to describe it. It's a mess. I mean, I didn't think I'd be a participant in history, and I am. All right. Well, I always say, like, hello, surviving humans, greetings, surviving humans. In videos, there's lots of ravens around here. So I'll end videos in the video by saying, follow the raven's rook and move cat, move, get out of my lap. Let's see how long it'll take him. Boom.